Welcome to Speak, Lead, Connect, where we explore how your voice, your leadership, and your ability to connect shape the impact you create in your life and in the lives of others. I'm your host, Dr. Lorilet Monegro. And today's conversation is about the role of structure, accountability, and truth in leadership. Because many people don't fail due to lack of ability, they struggle due to lack of direction. Today, I'm joined by Carmen Marrero, educator, leader, and founder of SETT, Setting Early Transitional Tactics, a transition readiness framework designed to prepare young people for life beyond high school with purpose, confidence, and direction. Carmen has more than 15 years of experience in education and has served in multiple roles, including paraprofessional, teacher, instructional leader, and adjunct instructor. She holds two master's degrees, multiple New York State certifications, and has dedicated her work to helping students build a voice, skills, and readiness they need for life beyond school. What makes Carmen's work powerful is that it was built from lived experience, from navigating instability, from setbacks, from rebuilding, and from choosing discipline when it would have been easier to just give up. Carmen, welcome to Speak Lead Connect. I am so honored to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your platform. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here to speak about the work that I'm doing and to, just give a piece of me to the public and showcase who, I am, what this program means to me, and where it's headed. Thank you so much, Dr. Monegro.
Fabulous. It is really a joy for me. Carmen, I want to start with your voice because, that reality sits at the center of your story. And so that you could share a little bit, like, for example, I'm going to give you a more pointed question. Like you share that you were always outspoken and confident early on, but that same strength without structure created challenges. What did you understand about your voice back then, and what do you understand about it now?
Yes. So again, being outspoken, I think is a trait you're born with it. It's in your DNA. If you're an advocate, you're going to move forward as such. And since a young age, I always spoke my mind. I always spoke, how I felt. I always said, if I didn't want something, I'll say I don't want it. But when I practiced that in institutions, it just looked different, especially being Latina, being of color, having big nose, big lips, short hair, coming with a different style. It transpired as aggressiveness, and it wasn't welcome, as if I couldn't speak, as if I didn't have a voice. And that infuriated me. At such an early age, I'm like, no, I get to say what I have to say because what I'm saying is what I need in order to move to the next step. And, my voice not only, became the way of advocating for myself, but it was also a way of advocating for my mother. My mother didn't know English. So from a young age, I'm translating from her, at doctor's offices, at the welfare office, at airports, at all of these, public and government agencies. I was the voice that my mom needed. So how dare you tell me that I'm not allowed to speak, that what I'm saying is wrong? And um, that happened throughout my entire school career, when I was in high school, when I was in middle school, when the teacher said, Carmen, sit down. And I'm like grabbing water, it's like, ma'am, I'm grabbing water. Give me a minute. You know what? Detention for speaking out loud during class. What? That's insane. So, you know, I learned that in order for you to have a voice in organizations that, in institutions, you have to have caliber and you have to have an education. And what do I mean by that? If you don't have a degree, in small words, if you don't have a degree, you don't get to speak. Okay. And that's why, I took that energy and I ran with it. And I put myself through school. I, you know, I found the path. I went to multiple schools and I said, I'm going to obtain this degree because if this is what it takes for me to have a voice, then by all means, I'm going to graduate so that I can say whatever it is that I need to say. Okay.
I love it.
So, sure enough, I went to Bergen Community College. It didn't work out for me. I went to the Dominican Republic. I went to la UCE, Universidad Central del Este. Um,
Mhm.
I did a few semesters, few years. I said it's time for me to go back home. I came back to the city. I enrolled into DeVry. I did a few credits there. The school wasn't what I was looking for. I enrolled in CUNY, and CUNY took it home. So I graduated with an associate's from LaGuardia, a bachelor's from City College in psychology, and then I applied to the New York City Teaching Fellows, where I obtained my master's degree in bilingual special education 7 through 12. And then I pursued a master's degree in school building leadership through the SITE program at College of St. Rose. And this is where I am now. And yes, I have a voice.
Yes. And not only that, with that voice comes influence. And I think that's something that now people can relate to, but it began from those humble beginnings of where you needed to become that amplifier of the needs of your family. And this is often the role of a lot of immigrant children who have this difficulty in the home where we are in an English speaking nation and the parents do not know how to advocate for the children. The children become the advocates of the parents. And the roles kind of reverse where the child now has to protect the adult because now the child is learning to navigate a system that is really, a difficult change for many who come from other countries. So I think that people can relate tremendously to your story. And I love that you turned that difficulty into the reason why you are not going to be left behind. And so there is the gift in taking a moment of difficulty and turning it into your blessing. Now, with that, I'd like to get into more of how this shaped who you are and all of this because you kind of went in a little bit because there is a difference between expressing yourself and leading with intention. So I want us to get into like that thought process. When did that shift happen for you where you're like, okay, fine, this was the fuel, but now I want to express myself and lead with intention? When did that shift happen for you? And when did your voice become more focused, more directed, and purposeful? Because at this point, now you've gone through the schooling. So what happened? Tell me a little bit about that because I think it shapes a lot of the work and the way you're showing up and doing things.
Yes. I mean, honestly, my past is what gives me the fuel to move forward. Okay. Because it's my history, it's my story. And again, transitioning from high school into, college, that transition was traumatic for me, because I did it on my own. And yes, along the way, I found people that were supportive, but the people that I needed the most didn't have the skills nor the knowledge to put me in the right place. So I was navigating blindly. This is why I attended multiple colleges because it was trial and error for me.
Mhm.
Um, and that process um, is what brought SETT to life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
lived it and I said, you know what? I see the kids. I've been teaching the kids. They're focused on their academics. They're learning how to analyze characters. They're learning how to analyze text. But where do they get to analyze themselves and who they are?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that was a big piece that was missing in my career in middle school and high school.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't exploring who I really was. It was very academic focused, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did have the privilege to attend a school that had performing arts, you know, and that was part of me. I'm a singer. I like to sing this and a third. But the analytical part of saying, this is what I do. This is
Mm-hmm.
how I learn. This
Mm-hmm.
is, this is what triggers me. These are my interests. And exploring that gracefully without judgment, wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself in those spaces where I'm like, Carmen, this is not what you want to do. You don't like this. You don't enjoy it. But why if you chose it? And now I'm stepping back and I'm retracking and I'm saying, okay, let's start over. Let's find something that connects with you. And that process, that back and forth, the
Mm-hmm.
setbacks, and then starting over again, and setback, and starting over again
Mm-hmm.
was what, yes, it made me frustrated. And it also inspired me to say, no one should be going through this. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want kids to go through this. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want them to go through this process because
Mm-hmm.
if you're not, first of all, by nature, my character is strong. I've always had a voice, like I said, and I've always been an advocate. So I had those skills already, and I was already implementing them. Um, Implementing them subconsciously, not being aware that I am, just
Mm-hmm.
because that's my survival mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
But um when I had to, come back from the Dominican Republic to the United States and navigate the city by myself, there were
Mm-hmm.
moments where I felt, cold, alone, hungry, that I needed a hug, that I needed a phone call, and that support system wasn't there. So that's what, stayed with me. So
Mm-hmm.
when I
Mm-hmm.
did my second master's, I did it in transitional planning. I did my research in transitional planning, and it was well supported by my professor. And I noticed that everybody in the classroom was like, Carmen, this is brilliant. This is such it's an area that, it's needed. Kids
Mm-hmm.
need it. And it's almost non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have 15 years as a of experience as an educator, and I've never seen anything like SET. I've never seen a program that has been brought into the classroom and introduced to the kids and say, all right, guys, today you're going to learn about you and what you like and your strengths and your weaknesses
Mm-hmm.
and what favors you and the way that you learn and what your triggers are. And we're going to teach you about budgeting and how to care and respect money. And we're also, like all the things that are essential for transitioning. When I left high school, I didn't have. So when I shared my passion with my colleagues, they said, Carmen, hands down, this is needed. Move forward, create it, implement it, and make sure that it's delivered throughout the United States because this is so powerful that you're going to transform lives. Kids need you. And I felt that
Yes.
and I feel that. So this is why I created SET.
I am just like excited for what's to come. And I totally agree with your colleagues because, just reading the name, I was like, oh my God, this is so powerful. And I said to myself, I want people who follow me or people who follow the kind of work and conversations that I like to have, which is how people assume leadership in what they're doing, um, to know what you have to offer Because not only are we talking about your personal, ways that you build out, but what resulted from that, how again you turn that journey into something that then becomes a light for others. And this is just really important for me that people can see, hey, if you're in a situation where you've been through experiences, those situations may just very well be the gift that allows you to help others so that others are not necessarily feeling trapped. And if they're going through that process, they can be accompanied as opposed to feeling the way you did, where you were like, I don't even know who to call. People can then have a way to still manage their situation. It doesn't mean they don't go through struggles. It doesn't mean there aren't difficulties, but having that awareness empowers the person. It empowers the youngster, the child, the family, and even the educator, because then the educator gets an insight. They're like, oh, this is how you process this better. Oh, that would help you more. It's just a win-win for everyone involved. And this is why I was like, oh my goodness, this is just, when something is birthed out of uh, pain on the underlying, but also the love that comes from it because you didn't give up and you didn't stay in the pain. You said, you know what? We gotta create something better. And for God's sake, you have. You have, and I love it. It's totally the idea of, I'm gonna say rebuilding and changing. Now, I have a question regarding that because you rebuilt a path through that the whole discipline, working and studying, showing up, and that takes courage. That's not something that is easy to do, especially when you've been through situations where you felt misunderstood. What season taught you responsibility and that success alone would have never taught you? How do you see that now in terms of looking back, in terms of how that has made you accountable, right? Because this idea of how do you rebuild but also stay accountable, because you have both going on in your story.
I mean, responsibility was embedded within, was embedded in me as an early age. I had the privilege to come from a family, a very humbled family in the Dominican Republic that, is made up of entrepreneurs. I have, generals, I have salesmen, we have teachers, we have when I was growing up, we have beauticians. So education in my family is priority. And it was always something that was spoken about in a mentorship way. Like, just seeing my uncles come back from work with their uniforms on, from the military, or, seeing my uncles come to ask for blessings to grandma's home at 5 in the morning to open up the hardware store. Just seeing all of those things and just being in a barrio, a vicinity that you see that movement of people just, getting up in the morning and attending their daily tasks in a graceful way. It just became the norm. And it was just something that it was, again, embedded in my hardcore memory. Just watching people get ready for work and having
Hmm.
these conversations as a youngster, and also uh mimicking that,
Of course, of
being ready
course.
for school, advocating for myself.
Hmm.
I need my lunch bag, mi lonchera, mi
Hmm.
mochila, mi tarea, my homework, and walking to school at 7 years old, and doing that in a way that was safe, because the community that I came from was so tight knit that people
Hmm.
knew, oh, ahí va la hija de Donon. This is
Uh-huh.
daughter, she's going to school. So
Yeah.
the community itself taught me responsibility. So that's why I'm very grateful to have lived my childhood in the Dominican Republic, because the culture and the people that surrounded me, the community, the ecosystem, that surrounded me in that time shaped what I was able to implement when I came back home to the United States.
100% can relate to everything that you're saying because it was the same for me. And I still have those memories in that sense of being very well supported by the loving community. And I think that's one of the things that somehow we haven't quite gotten here in the US. Everybody seems to be very isolated. So we have been fortunate for sure to have had that structure, because that is a form of accountability that is in a loving way as opposed in an accusatory way or in a way where you feel defeated. So I can see how that plants the seed for us to be resilient as a culture. And I say us because I'm also Dominican. So I'm able to share in that lived um, type of experience. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about, SETT. And I know you kind of went in a little bit, but what makes SETT, right? This particular programming different from other programs that may already exist. While there's scarcity of I'm going to say programs that really do this effectively, what makes this one like that you're like, you know what, in my research, this is what I found and this is why I created. Can you share a little bit on that? Because I want
Absolutely.
to position the impact of this great program. I want people to know that this is not just, oh, here, just do something, one more
Right.
program, and it only can come from you who authored it. So this is why I ask you this.
So that is a full developed curriculum that has a teacher guide, the curriculum itself, and a framework, and it's accompanied by a workbook. So what makes SET special is that yes, there is a workbook that guides students through different modules where they eventually build a life plan. It becomes an essay where they embed everything that they've learned. But what the highlight of SET is that there are teacher practices within the framework that are in place for the instructor to implement as they're going through the work with students. Okay.
Perfect.
Not only that, there's also supports for L's. There are picture dictionaries with kid-friendly definitions and key terms that tie to the workbook. There's also supports for instructors to facilitate instruction for special education students, and that happens through modeling, scaffolding, using
Perfect.
patient skills, annotation strategies, sorry, um, and other study-based practices that are well known in the education field and that are practiced and that they've been practiced for many years and that are still being used within the classroom. So yes, this framework, this curriculum prepares kids for the future, but it also gives teachers the tools necessary that they need in order to give access to the students. And not only that, the practices that are embedded within the curriculum, teachers could also, what do you say? They can cross the practices between different subjects. So not only, preparation for the future, but it can be embedded in ELA, it can be embedded in science, it can be embedded in social studies. Okay. So it is a gateway to train teachers that are new to education, to give them that uh, not training, but per se, just to give them the tools that they need in order to implement effective instruction within their practices.
Which is all really good because now it's not just the student, it's also the instructor that gets to be able to fully, I guess the goal would be for them to be fully one on understanding of the curriculum itself, but also reflect on those practices that really meet that student's need. And so that they're not kind of like, oh, what do I do? They know what to do because there's a guidance. It's almost like a recipe book, the way I'm
Exactly.
interpreting it.
No, absolutely. Yes. I don't know if you can see it, but this will be, let me see.
Yes,
So,
I can see it.
yeah,
Oh,
so this is the, yeah, I know. It's
it goes in and out. It's okay. It goes in and out.
this is the teacher guide. And in the teacher guide, like, for example, in my experience in the classroom, when I was handed a curriculum, it was thick, it was dense, it had a lot of information. We would spend more time reading the lessons, and I'm talking about, okay, so let me backtrack. So I was an ELA teacher, and yes, ELA content can be very complex, especially to deliver it, because as an educator, you have to read the material, you have to make
Hmm.
sure that you read the passage, you annotate it, you create questions, and you
Yep.
also read the lesson plan that comes with the curriculum.
Yes.
So it just took so much time away from actual instruction that, I kept that in mind. And I said, I'm going to create this curriculum, but I'm going to make it accessible where teachers can look at it and say, okay, this is what I'm doing. So, for instance, the first lesson, it gives an introduction and it prompts students to think about who they are. So, in the special education teacher support portion of SETT, it states teacher instructional action. Okay. So every
Hmm.
lesson has that embedded. So what does that look like? What is the teacher doing? Well,
Hmm.
you're thinking out loud while answering the prompt. You
Hmm.
rephrase questions in plain language. You
Hmm.
guide students in choosing a response.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Very explicit, very direct. If
Hmm.
the student cannot access on, the exercise on their own, then you model for them. You think out loud so that
Hmm.
they have that example and then they can mimic that.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
The second portion of the special education teacher support that is embedded in the curriculum is how to modify the materials for students. Okay, you have different learners. You have tactile learners, you have auditory learners, you have visual learners. Okay, unfortunately, a curriculum is not going to cater to all of that. And we need the support from the community to give access because we have different learners. Everybody is
Hmm.
different. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, how can you give access? How can you modify for students the curriculum if they aren't able to fully engage in the exercise? Well, you shorten the prompt to one
Hmm.
sentence, too long. Add a visual cue. You can Google, something that ties to the prompt
Hmm.
and show them, look, this is it. You give them examples. You keep
Hmm.
their mind, you stimulate their mind so that they can get to that aha moment. Allow verbal or dictated responses. Okay, what does that mean? You let them express their ideas, even if it extends, and then you backtrack and you bring them back and you take from what they're saying to tie it back to the exercise.
Hmm.
Okay, so it gives, again, it gives the instructor a prompt way of
Hmm.
delivering instruction.
Hmm. Yes, it's a great way to facilitate so that they're not there just caught up in the theory. Because what happens is, and I understand where you're coming from, very often, because of the demand for rigor in creating materials and how you develop things in the pedagogical sense, there usually is so much theoretical review within curriculums that we miss the actual essence because we get bombarded with so much of the theoretical component, which I almost wish they kept separate and put it in a separate component. So, hey, here's all the research so you can be informed and you
Right.
know how we arrived at all this, which is great, but it's not the practical aspect. Your rendering, however, is very practical so that anyone, whether they're a teacher or not, just based on what you shared, I can see that whether they're a full on teacher or not, they can facilitate because they have a very clear, direct regular language, not pedagogical terms that no one may really understand right off the bat. And you just kept it very like accessible. Like, hey, no, I want you to just keep it simple. I want the kids to be served. And this is, I see the intention is, no, I want it to be that bridge and make it easy. Um,
Right.
I love that.
Yeah, this is not about, there are, you have so many frameworks that,
Yes.
that are embedded and implemented in schools, and it becomes the focus of instruction, and it takes away from the actual passion that teachers have, because once you close your door, if you're truly passionate about teaching, that
Mhm.
framework you're going to put aside for a second to reach the kids, and the
Yes.
only way that you can reach the kids is by connecting with them and giving them access. And that's what SET does. And I am giving, future instructors a gift because I'm not only saying, look, there's a workbook that you can use to prepare kids for the future through the prompts that are within, but I'm also giving you everything that I know as a teacher and as an educator, so that you can implement in your own practices, whether you're teaching science, English, ELA, math. I'm teaching
Right.
you how to teach.
Right.
And
It's
that's
it's
right.
and that's what I capture from that, which is the great part that you're basically saying, hey, here's the path, here's the method. Let's do it, as opposed to let me put you 500 hoops and ladders. And I
Right.
love that. And I think this is going to be a big win once it continues to spread, that people catch on that you're offering something that is very clear, and while it's simple to implement, it is not an easy thing to come by. Often people dismiss when we put something in simplicity because people get impressed by convoluted ideas. But what is amazing about your work is that you took complex and difficult conversations, and you made it so easy and approachable. And that is the brain of a genius. So I really love what you're doing here. And I'm so like excited for what's to come. I can't wait to, at some point get a physical copy of your work. I don't know where to order it. Maybe you can share that as well if that's something that's available for people to order. Um, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully collaborating with you and making sure that this becomes accessible to others. So we will definitely be more in touch on a more professional level, and I commit to that right here because I love your work. I love what you're doing. Now, I want to touch in. We're almost closing up. I just wanted to ask you a few things here, a question about leadership, because you spent over 15 years, now in education. You've been supporting students across different settings and needs. Like you mentioned, the English language learners, students with special education needs, and, across age ranges. So your experience has led you to really understand, these needs. From your experiences, what are students not being taught that they actually need to succeed in real life? Not only from the workbook standpoint, but like one thing that you'd be like, you know what, this is really important for kids to know.
Yes. Oh my God, that is a very heavy question because it connects to the passion that I have for education. And I'm not gonna say that they're not being taught, these things, but I I see that kids are lacking security within themselves. Okay, to be able to make choices on their own and say, I stand by this, and this is why
Mm,
I want to do, and what I'm going to, and this is how I'm going to move forward. A lot of them are following and not,
mm,
and you can see that. And then that makes the work for teachers harder because it becomes an extra step to build that part of the student where you're telling them you don't have to go that path, you don't have to go that route. Okay, you can make different choices, you can make better choices. So I feel like if we were to educate with a level of certainty and security, shaping the mind of the child to, in that moment say a hard no. That's not me. I don't want that. I don't need that. Or, to give them the power to make that conscious decision between good and bad, between what's
yes.
right and what's wrong. Okay. So that's what's really making, again, the work really hard. Like the mentorship portion of education is poor, and it's not a pillar, you know. Again, the main focus is to make sure that kids are reading and writing, but even then it's an issue because most of the kids that are in in low performing schools or in disadvantaged schools are reading two or three grade levels behind.
Mm-hmm,
And I feel
mm-hmm.
like that gap could also be closed if we provide we provide appropriate mentorship to give that security level to students, to embody that security level. And I think that,
Yes.
that's really what keeps kids from reaching the next step, from moving their grades from a C to a B, from a D to a
I,
C, you
I
know.
I love this. I love this concept, and it makes sense to me, this whole idea of mentorship and how this program can assist in that process. Now, I want to ask you one last question, and this would be a question on leadership. I wanted to kind of bring that in. It is part of what I focus on and what I love to learn about, and just seeing it in different ways in people. When you think about leadership, what does it mean to lead in a way that actually changes the direction of someone's life? What does that mean for you when you hear that leadership? How do you do that?
It means, yes, it means transmutation. It means taking a situation that could have broken you, that could have brought you down, that could have ruined you, and taking that energy and transmuting into something great. Taking that energy and building something that will impact lives forever, that will impact communities, that would become a legacy. Leadership is transmutation and legacy.
Yes,
Because
I love it.
when you are leading, you do face those challenges that
That's
may
true.
set back. So you always have to grab that energy, transform it into positivity, and move forward. And that's how
Yes.
we and that's how we bring change.
Yes, I love this because it asks of us to pull from under and to keep forward following the light. And when we do that, even when there's darkness around us, we're sure to get across.
That's
So I
it.
love that. Um, Carmen, I want to just say thank you, one, for your honesty, right? Because you're kind of calling out things that you have seen, for your clarity, and the work you're doing to create real impact in the world and in the lives of the children that you work with. This also impacts the greater society, the families, because then everybody is an ecosystem that gets impacted by this specific work. What this conversation reminds us is that direction matters, that structure matters, and accountability changes those outcomes when we have expectations of our children that they do have greatness within them and that they can discover that with guidance and support, then the world becomes a better place. And that is the kind of work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And to everyone listening, where in your life do you need more structure? Ask yourself a little bit. Where do you need more clarity? Spend a little more time thinking about what we've discussed today. And, where do you need to take on more responsibilities so that you can lead more effectively? I make these podcasts with the desire that when people listen, they get to think and connect their heart and brain so that they can be motivated and transformed and informed. It is critical because this is our time and because, hey, your voice matters and it shapes how you think. Your leadership shapes what you do, and your connection shapes the impact you create. You can learn more about Carmen Marrero and her work at SETT, and that is www.settactics.org. And as always, Carmen, I want to thank you yet again for being part of Speak, Lead, Connect. If this conversation resonated, please, to all our listeners, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. Until next time, remember, your voice is your power, your leadership is your legacy, and your connection is your bridge to transformation.